They all mocked. The poor mechanic, unaware. He's a secret billionaire seeking love. Before we begin the story, please leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Once upon a time, there was a man named Ethan Blackwood. To everyone around him, he was just an ordinary, struggling mechanic. Someone who worked long hours, covered in grease, fixing broken cars. He barely made enough to get by. But the truth was, Ethan wasn't ordinary at all. He was secretly a billionaire, one of the wealthiest men in the world. But he had chosen to live like a regular guy. He had grown tired of people loving him for his wealth, not for who he was. So he left behind his mansion, his fancy suits, and all the luxuries of his previous life, hoping to find something money couldn't buy: true love. For years, Ethan had been surrounded by women who were only interested in him for his money. They smiled at him, flirted with him, but he knew they weren't really seeing him. They were just seeing his bank account. He was done with that. He wanted someone who loved him for who he truly was, not for the riches he could offer. So he decided to live humbly, working at a small auto repair shop, just to experience real life and maybe, just maybe, find love. Down the street from the auto shop was a little fast food restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple place where locals could grab a quick meal of rice and beans or something light after a long day. It was owned by Patricia Wells, a strict but hard-working woman who ran the place with the help of her daughter Olivia and niece Sophia. Sophia Woods had lived with her Uncle Thomas and his wife Patricia since she was a child. She had lost both her parents at a young age. While her uncle took her in, life wasn't easy. Patricia had never really treated her like family. She worked her harder than anyone else in the restaurant, but Sophia never complained. She loved cooking, and despite everything, she remained kind and full of life. Sophia had always kept her head down, just doing what was asked of her, surviving. But life was about to change for her, in ways she didn't expect. Ethan began coming into the restaurant every day for lunch. He would always sit at the same corner table, order the same simple meal, rice and beans, nothing more. At first, Sophia thought it was just his preference. Maybe he didn't like meat, or maybe it was because of the work he did. But after a few days, she started to wonder, could he not afford it? It wasn't like he looked poor. His clothes were always clean, his shoes polished, but there was something different about him, something that made her think there was more to him than met the eye. One afternoon, she decided to ask him. "Excuse me," she said, walking up to his table, her voice a little nervous. "Why don't you ever order meat with your meal?" Ethan looked up, surprised. No one had ever asked him that before. He stared at his plate for a moment, then sighed. "I don't have the money for it," he said, his voice quiet. Sophia's heart sank. She had suspected it. But hearing him say it out loud made it more real. He was working so hard, barely scraping by, and yet he never complained. "Are you a mechanic?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, I just started working." Things are tough. Sophia swallowed hard. She knew what it was like to struggle, to work long hours just to make ends meet. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about him, the mechanic who couldn't even afford a piece of meat. The next day, something changed. Sophia couldn't help herself. As she was serving Ethan his usual meal, she slipped a small piece of meat onto his plate when no one was looking. She leaned down and whispered, "Don't tell anyone." Ethan stared at the plate, shocked. His eyes went from the meat to Sophia and back to the food. But before he could say anything, she gave him a small smile and walked away. It wasn't just the meat. It was the act of kindness that left him speechless. No one had ever done something like this for him before. He had been rich for so long, but it had never felt this real. No one had ever cared for him this way. That was the best meal he had ever eaten, not because of the food, but because of what it represented. After the small act of kindness, Ethan became more than just a regular customer to Sophia. He was still that quiet mechanic who came in every day for lunch. But now, she noticed him in a way she hadn't before. She noticed how he always sat in the same corner, always ordered the same simple meal, rice and beans, no meat, no frills. She noticed how tired he looked every day, the dark circles under his eyes, the slight slouch in his shoulders. But there was also something else, something different about him. Despite his rough appearance, he had a quiet dignity about him, a humility that intrigued her. Most men she knew were either arrogant or dismissive. But Ethan? He didn't speak much, but when he did, it was always with respect. And there was something in his eyes, something that made her think there was more to him than he let on. As the days went by, Sophia couldn't help but think about him. She found herself looking forward to when he came in, just to see him. She started making small talk with him, asking him about his work or the weather. But it was never anything too deep, just small exchanges that left her wondering about him. She noticed, too, that when Ethan wasn't at the restaurant, she missed him. Not in a romantic way, at least not yet. But there was a longing, a curiosity that pulled at her heart. One afternoon, as Sophia set Ethan's meal in front of him, she couldn't help herself. She asked, "Ethan, are you sure you're okay? You look tired, like you haven't been sleeping much." Ethan looked up at her, surprised by the question. He hadn't expected her to notice, but there was a concern in her voice that caught him off guard. "I'm fine," he said, shrugging it off. "Just long hours at the shop. It gets to me sometimes." Sophia frowned. She had a feeling that there was more to it than just being tired from work. Ethan didn't seem like the type of man to complain, but the signs were clear. She had seen him work long hours, but that wasn't what was wearing him down. There was something deeper. "Is everything okay with the shop?" she asked, wanting to keep the conversation going. He paused, looking down at his plate. "It's all right," he said quietly. "I just don't have much. It's hard to make ends meet when you're barely scraping by." Sophia's heart went out to him. She had known hardship all her life, but hearing him speak about it like that made her feel even more connected to him. She knew what it was like to struggle, to work hard for little in return. But seeing Ethan, someone who had everything and chose to live a humble life, made her realize just how strong he was. It wasn't the lack of money that bothered him. It was something else, something unspoken. A few days later, as Sophia was serving Ethan again, she found herself slipping a small piece of chicken onto his plate. It wasn't much, just a small portion, but it was enough to make her feel like she was doing something. She placed it in front of him and whispered, "Please don't tell anyone." Ethan looked up, startled. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. He didn't say anything, but his expression softened. His lips curled into a faint smile as he looked back at the plate. He picked up the piece of meat slowly, almost as if he was afraid it wasn't real. Then, he took a bite, savoring the taste. It wasn't just about the meat. It was the gesture, the kindness that came with it. No one had ever done something like that for him before. No one had ever cared that much. Sophia smiled to herself as she walked away, knowing she had done the right thing, even if she couldn't explain why it felt so important. It wasn't just food. It was a small act of kindness that meant the world to him. And it meant something to her, too. As the days went by, this small exchange became something more. Every day, Ethan would come in, and every day, Sophia would quietly add a little something extra to his meal. Sometimes it was a small portion of chicken. Other times it was a slice of bread. Something simple, but always with the same quiet gesture and the same whispered words. "Don't tell anyone." Ethan started to look forward to his lunches at the restaurant, not just because of the food, but because of Sophia. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, The way she smiled at him when she handed him his meal. The way her eyes sparkled when she asked him about his day. He couldn't help but notice how different she was from the women he'd met in his past. She didn't care about his wealth or his status. She was kind, genuine, and most importantly, she saw him for who he really was, not for the man with money, but the man who was struggling, who was trying to find his place in the world. One day, as Sophia placed his meal in front of him, Ethan decided it was time to talk to her. He had been holding back for weeks, not wanting to reveal the truth, but he couldn't ignore the connection they shared anymore. "Sophia," he said, his voice a little shaky, "I want to thank you for everything. The food, the kindness, it means more to me than you know." Sophia blinked, surprised by his sudden seriousness. "It's just food, Ethan," she said with a light laugh, but there was a warmth in her voice that made him feel even more vulnerable. "No, it's not just food," he said, shaking his head. "It's your kindness. It's the way you see me, not as some rich guy, but as a person. I haven't had that in a long time." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had no idea what to say, so she simply smiled, her eyes softening. "You deserve to be seen, Ethan, for who you really are." Ethan looked at her, his chest tightening. It was the first time someone had said something like that to him. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't invisible, like he wasn't just the sum of his money. He was Ethan, and that was enough. As the days went on, Sophia couldn't help but feel more drawn to Ethan. The way he was so different from anyone she'd ever met, the way he had such a quiet strength about him, it made her admire him more with each passing day. She found herself thinking about him more, imagining what it would be like to know him better, to understand the layers behind his quiet demeanor. But she also couldn't ignore the growing tension within her. She had always been the one who worked hard, kept her head down, and followed the rules. She had never allowed herself to dream of a life outside of the restaurant. But Ethan made her want more. He made her feel like she could have more. She just wasn't sure if it was possible. She wasn't sure if someone like her could ever have a future with someone like him. But for the first time in her life, she found herself wanting to take that leap. As the weeks passed, Sophia and Ethan grew closer, yet there was a palpable tension in the air. Every time Ethan sat down for lunch, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of guilt. The kindness Sophia had shown him was something he could never have imagined. But the more time he spent with her, the more he realized how important she had become to him. Sophia saw him as just a regular guy, someone worthy of kindness and compassion. But Ethan knew deep down that he wasn't just an ordinary man. His secret, the one he had been hiding for so long, was beginning to weigh on him. He couldn't continue pretending forever. He had never been the type of man to lie or deceive, but he had come to Sophia as a mechanic. Nothing more, nothing less. He had chosen this life, but at some point, he would have to tell her the truth. She deserved to know the real him. The idea of revealing his true identity terrified him. What would she think? Would she still see him as the man she had grown to care for? Or would the money and the life that came with it be too much for her to accept? Meanwhile, Sophia couldn't deny the growing feelings she had for Ethan. It had started small, little glances, small gestures. But soon she found herself thinking about him constantly. She loved the way he smiled at her, the way his eyes softened when they talked. But what really struck her was how deeply he cared for others, especially those who had nothing to offer him in return. It wasn't about the money or the fame. Sophia realized that Ethan had something much more valuable. He had heart. He was a man who gave, even when he had nothing to give. And Sophia found herself drawn to him more each day. She hadn't had many meaningful relationships in her life, and she was beginning to wonder if maybe this was what she had been waiting for all along. But doubts began to creep in. She noticed that Ethan never talked about his past, never mentioned family or where he came from. She started to wonder if he was hiding something from her, something important. One rainy afternoon, as the rain pelted against the windows of the small restaurant, Ethan walked in, his face pale and his eyes more serious than usual. Sophia looked up from the counter, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the expression on his face. He sat down at his usual table, but today there was something different about him. Sophia felt the change in the air as soon as she approached him. She placed his meal in front of him, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Ethan, is everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." He hesitated, staring at the plate of rice in front of him, as though it were the most important thing in the world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice low and almost shaky. "Something I should have told you from the beginning. I've been hiding something, and it's time you knew the truth." Sophia froze. Her pulse quickened, and for a moment she felt a pang of fear. Was he leaving? Did he no longer want to be friends? But the look in his eyes told her that whatever he was about to say wasn't about running away from her. It was something deeper, something more painful. "I'm not who you think I am," he continued, his voice tight. "I haven't been completely honest with you, Sophia. I've been pretending to be someone I'm not, and I can't do that anymore." Sophia blinked, trying to process his words. "What do you mean?" Ethan swallowed hard before continuing. "I'm not just a mechanic, He paused, taking a deep breath. "I'm a billionaire. My name is Ethan Blackwood. The life I've been living here, working in this shop, it's not real. It's just a cover. I've been hiding from my past, from my wealth. I came here to find something real, something I couldn't buy." Sophia's eyes widened. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of what he had just said. Ethan wasn't just the quiet mechanic she'd come to know. He was someone else, someone with a life far removed from the one she had imagined for him. You're a billionaire?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ethan nodded, his eyes full of regret. "Yes, but I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to be loved for who I am, not for what I have." Sophia felt a wave of emotions, confusion, shock, and an unexpected surge of anger. Why hadn't he told her sooner? Why had he hidden so much of himself from her? Sophia stood there, staring at him, trying to process what she had just heard. She had always thought there was more to him, but this was beyond what she could have imagined. "Why didn't you tell me?" she finally asked, her voice shaking. "Why hide it? All this time I've been helping you, believing in you, and now you tell me you've been lying about who you are?" Ethan looked up at her, his face full of sorrow. "I wasn't lying, I just didn't want you to see me as a rich man. I wanted to be with someone who loved me for who I am, not my money." Sophia felt the tears welling up in her eyes. She had been hurt, but there was something more than just betrayal. It was the overwhelming feeling that she had been living in a fantasy, a world that wasn't real. For the first time, she felt confused about what she knew to be true, and more importantly, what she wanted. "You could have had everything," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to hide from it. You didn't have to hide from me." Ethan stood up slowly, walking over to her. "I know, and I'm sorry. But I didn't want to be loved for my wealth. I wanted to be loved for me." Sophia looked at him, the truth settling in her heart. She wasn't sure what to believe. Her feelings for him were still real, but everything had changed in an instant. Could she look past the man he had been pretending to be and still love the man standing in front of her? There was a long silence between them, filled only with the sound of the rain outside. Finally, Sophia spoke, her voice quieter but steady. "I need time, Ethan. This is a lot to process." But I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at myself. For not seeing it sooner. For not questioning it. She looked him straight in the eyes. But I want to try. I want to understand you. Who you really are. And why you felt like you had to hide. Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. He had feared this moment for so long, but Sophia's response wasn't anger. It was understanding. And maybe that was all he needed. Thank you, he said softly. I don't deserve it, but thank you. Sophia smiled faintly, a small, tentative step toward forgiveness. I'll need time, but I think we can work this out. After Ethan's revelation about his true identity, Sophia felt like the ground beneath her had shifted. The truth, that he was not just the mechanic she had come to admire, but a wealthy billionaire, was too much for her to absorb at once. Ethan, the man who had been struggling right alongside her, was living a life of luxury, hidden beneath the rough exterior of a mechanic's uniform. She tried to process everything, but her mind was overwhelmed. Ethan's truth created a storm of emotions within her. On one hand, she couldn't deny the guilt she felt. Was she wrong for accepting his kindness, his company? On the other hand, she couldn't help but feel the betrayal of having been kept in the dark. He hadn't told her, and in doing so, she had fallen in love with an illusion, a man who had not shown her the truth. As days passed, Sophia found herself at a crossroads. She didn't want to lose Ethan. He was too important to her, and the connection they shared was too real. But she also struggled with the growing resentment that she had been lied to. She needed time to process, time to think. But Ethan, as kind as he was also distant, letting her have her space, waiting for her to make the next move. On the other side, Ethan was tormented by the fact that he had kept his true identity hidden for so long. He had thought that if he just stayed quiet and worked hard enough, maybe Sophia would love him for who he truly was. But now, the reality of the situation was beginning to hit him harder than ever before. Sophia was upset. She needed time to reconcile the man he had pretended to be and the man he truly was. In his heart, Ethan knew he had done the right thing by leaving behind his fortune and living like a normal person. But the weight of the truth was now too heavy. He could feel the walls closing in on him as Sophia's distance grew more palpable. Every time he saw her, he could see the conflict in her eyes. It broke him because he couldn't understand why she hadn't embraced him as he hoped she would. He wanted nothing more than for her to see him, the real him, the man he had been all along, someone who had just wanted to find true love, not love born out of his wealth. It was on one of those quiet afternoons when the restaurant was practically empty that Sophia found herself standing at the counter, staring at the door. The rain had stopped, but the world outside still felt as cold and distant as the thoughts swirling in her mind. Her thoughts kept returning to Ethan, to the kindness he had shown her, to the way he had made her feel special despite the rough exterior. And then, something clicked. Sophia realized that she had been focusing too much on the money, on the fact that Ethan was a billionaire, and not enough on the man he had become in her life. He had never shown off his wealth, and in fact, he had hidden it for her, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted her to love him for who he was, not for his money. She felt ashamed of herself for doubting him, for questioning his sincerity. Ethan had never lied to her, and if anything, he had only shown her kindness and vulnerability, things that most people with his status would never dare to reveal. And then, the thoughts of Ethan's loneliness struck her. He had been trying to hide his wealth because he had grown tired of people loving him only for his money. He didn't want her to see him as a rich man. He wanted to be loved for who he was, the man behind the fortune. Suddenly, the guilt and anger she had been holding on to for so long melted away. Sophia had always wanted something real, and now that she saw the man standing before her, raw and unguarded, she realized that he was exactly what she had been looking for all along. Later that evening, Ethan arrived at the restaurant, as usual. But there was a difference in the air. Sophia was already at the counter, waiting for him. Her heart raced as she caught sight of him, but she had made a decision. This was the moment. As Ethan walked up to her, his usual quiet demeanor was now replaced with a sense of nervous anticipation. He had already apologized to her silently, letting his actions speak for themselves, but tonight, he needed to make it clear how deeply he regretted the hurt he had caused. "Sophia," he began, his voice filled with sincerity, "I want to say I'm sorry. I know I hurt you, and I never meant to. I should have told you sooner about who I really am, but I was scared of losing you, and now I'm here asking for your forgiveness." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes softening. She could see the pain and regret in his eyes, and suddenly, the weight of everything lifted. She stepped forward and took his hand gently in hers, looking up into his eyes. "I understand, Ethan," she said softly, her voice steady. "You were just trying to find something real. And I was scared, too. I let my insecurities get the better of me. But I've realized that I don't want to let fear and doubt keep us apart anymore." Ethan's eyes widened, hope filling his chest as he squeezed her hand. "You mean it?" Sophia nodded, her lips curling into a smile. "I do." The days that followed were filled with a new energy. The tension between Ethan and Sophia was gone, replaced by a new level of understanding. They continued to work together at the restaurant, but now there was a growing bond between them, one that went beyond the mechanic and the restaurant worker. Sophia stopped seeing Ethan as just a man with money. She saw him for who he truly was, a man of integrity, someone who had given up everything to find genuine love. And Ethan, for the first time, felt completely seen for who he really was. They started spending more time together outside of the restaurant, getting to know each other on a deeper level. And every day, they found that the connection between them only grew stronger. Sophia knew that there was still much to learn about Ethan and his past, but she also knew that love wasn't about perfection. It was about being open to each other's flaws, accepting each other for who they were, and building a life together, no matter what obstacles lay ahead. The days following Ethan and Sophia's heart-to-heart conversation were filled with promise. The restaurant was still a place of work for both of them, but there was a new, subtle change in the air. Ethan continued to fix cars in the back, but now he wasn't just the mechanic. He was Sophia's partner, and for the first time in a long time, he felt peaceful in his life. No longer was he pretending. No longer did he have to wear the facade of the poor, struggling man. He was simply himself, and Sophia had accepted him, all of him, without reservation. The truth about who Ethan was hadn't pushed her away. Instead, it had brought them closer, something he never thought possible. He had feared that Sophia would turn away from him, but now, as she looked at him with tenderness and love in her eyes, he knew he had found what he had been searching for all along. One afternoon, as they finished a late lunch together at the restaurant, Ethan turned to Sophia, his voice low but certain. "Sophia, I've been thinking," he began. "I've spent so much of my life hiding behind this mask of being a regular guy, but I think it's time to stop running from who I really am." Sophia looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. "What do you mean?" Ethan paused, his gaze steady, but there was a new determination in his eyes. "I've been living this way for years, pretending I don't have everything I need. But I've realized that being authentic doesn't mean I have to hide my wealth. I'm going to take my life back." Sophia leaned forward, intrigued. "How?" "I want to expand the business, Sophia. Not just the restaurant, but the whole community. I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I know I want to make a bigger impact. I have the resources to do it. I just need to stop running from my past and take responsibility." She smiled, her eyes lighting up. "That's amazing, Ethan. You deserve to be proud of everything you've achieved. And you don't have to do it alone. The next few weeks were filled with plans and discussions about what the future could look like for both of them. Ethan had already made up his mind to take the plunge and re-enter the world he had left behind. But now, he wanted Sophia to be by his side. Sophia, however, wasn't just a passive observer. She had always been driven by a desire to help others. Over the years, she had learned that love and kindness were the most important things in life. And Ethan had taught her that even in the face of hardship, generosity and compassion were the true markers of strength. Together, they began to build a vision for something bigger than themselves. They envisioned a company that would offer more than just jobs, a community-driven business that would help people, not just profit. They both wanted a legacy that reflected their values: hard work, kindness, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly were, not for their bank accounts. But while Ethan and Sophia were moving forward, they knew there were still some loose ends to tie up, especially with Ethan's family. His parents had always been supportive of him, but they hadn't fully understood why he chose to live in obscurity for so long. Sophia, on the other hand, had always felt the weight of her broken family, her strained relationship with her parents, the resentment she carried from childhood, and her search for belonging. Ethan's conversation with his parents would not be easy, but it was necessary. As he prepared for the meeting, he felt a nervousness he hadn't anticipated. Could he reconcile his past with his future? Could he accept his wealth without being trapped by it? That evening, Ethan and Sophia drove to his family's mansion. The journey was quiet, the tension palpable. Sophia held Ethan's hand as they parked in the expansive driveway, the vast house looming before them. Sophia could feel Ethan's unease as they stepped out of the car. His parents were waiting inside, his mother's face unreadable, and his father sitting silently in the study. Ethan took a deep breath before he knocked on the door. The moment they walked in, Ethan's mother looked up from her tea. "Ethan, it's good to see you." Her voice was calm, but there was a certain coldness there. Ethan's father stood up, giving a slight nod. "So, you've decided to bring her with you this time." Sophia gave a polite smile, but her nerves were on edge. This wasn't just any dinner. This was a dinner where they would all have to face the truth, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. Ethan's mother crossed her arms. "I hear you've made some decisions, Ethan." "Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Ethan looked directly at her. "I do, Mom, and I'm asking you to accept my decisions. I'm no longer running from who I am, from my life, or from what I want. I'm with Sophia. She's the woman I love. And I don't need your approval to be happy." His father's expression softened just a bit, but his mother still seemed unsure. "You've always been rebellious, Ethan. You want to leave your life behind, but that's not always possible. You're a part of this family's legacy." Ethan's voice grew firmer. "I am who I am, Mom, but I won't abandon Sophia, and I won't abandon the life I want with her." His mother finally let out a heavy sigh. "I see you've made your choice, but I can't pretend to understand it." She glanced at Sophia, who was sitting quietly, nervously. "You will be an outsider to us, no matter what." Sophia met her gaze, but there was no anger in her heart. "I don't want to change anyone's mind. I just want to build a future with Ethan, a future that reflects who we both are." There was a long silence. Ethan looked at Sophia, taking a deep breath. "You're right," he said, his voice steady. "I don't need their approval. I'm happy with you. That's all I need." After dinner, Ethan and Sophia returned to the restaurant, a sense of relief washing over them. They had faced the truth, together, and had begun the process of forging a future that was uniquely theirs. As they stood in the quiet of the restaurant, Sophia smiled up at him. "So, what now?" Ethan looked around, taking in the familiar setting of the restaurant. "Now, we build our dream. Together." And for the first time, Ethan felt truly free. Free from his past, from the weight of his family's expectations, and from the need to prove anything to anyone. He was Ethan, and he had found Sophia, the love he had been searching for all along. The weeks following the dinner with Ethan's family were quiet, but charged with anticipation. For the first time in their relationship, Ethan and Sophia had to face their most vulnerable selves. Sophia had accepted Ethan's true identity, and Ethan had embraced the reality of their future together. Yet even with this newfound clarity, obstacles were still present, more internal than external. The restaurant, once a sanctuary for both of them, had become a battleground for their ambitions. Ethan wanted to scale up, to expand their business into something greater than a small local restaurant, while Sophia was still grounded in the idea that love and kindness were at the center of it all. For her, money wasn't everything, and she feared that by pursuing too much ambition, they could lose sight of what made their relationship authentic. One evening, after the usual dinner rush had passed, Sophia sat down with Ethan, her thoughts heavy. "Ethan, I've been thinking. What if we don't lose ourselves in this dream? What if expanding the business takes us away from the simple things that brought us together in the first place? The authenticity of what we have. Don't you think that's the most important thing?" Ethan looked at her, his brow furrowed. He had been planning their future in his mind for weeks, but this was the first time Sophia had questioned it so directly. "I understand, Sophia," he said, his voice calm but serious. "But I've spent my whole life running from who I am. I've hidden from my wealth, and now that I'm starting to accept it, I don't want to waste it. I want to help people, build a future where we both can do more than just survive. I want us to thrive together." Sophia paused, looking at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. "And we will. But what I want is for us to grow, together, without losing sight of the love that brought us here. We need to remember why we're doing this. It's not for the money. It's for each other." There was a long silence. Ethan could see her point, and he knew in his heart that Sophia's concerns were valid. It wasn't about building an empire. It was about keeping their foundation strong, something authentic, something that would endure. The next day, Ethan made an important decision. They would not sacrifice the values that brought them together. Instead, they would work smarter, focusing on what mattered most, providing jobs for those in need, creating a community-driven business that reflected the same integrity that both he and Sophia shared. He wanted to give back, not just build a business empire. With the decision made, Ethan set to work. He arranged a meeting with local entrepreneurs, potential investors, and even with Sophia's help, reached out to those who would benefit from a more equitable approach to business. Sophia was not just a bystander anymore. She was his partner, and her voice had shaped his decisions. They were building this future together. As the plans for their new business began to take shape, Sophia felt the weight of their combined dreams. She had feared that the business might distance them, but instead, she found that their relationship had only grown stronger. There was balance now, Ethan's ambition, paired with Sophia's grounding influence. However, Ethan still had to face his family. His mother, Lady Okafor, had not let go of her disapproval. She still thought that Sophia was beneath him, and Ethan's choice to pursue a life with her without the full blessing of the family weighed heavily on him. "Ethan, are you sure about this?" Lady Okafor asked one evening over dinner. Her voice was calm but sharp. "This Sophia, she's not from the kind of background you should be investing in. You're a Blackwood. You come from a lineage that holds power and prestige, and this is how you choose to live your life?" Ethan looked at his mother, frustration beginning to boil. He had been patient for so long, but now, the need for his family to accept Sophia was undeniable. He had hoped time would change his mother's mind, but it was clear she had not shifted in her thinking. "Mother, I'm not asking for your approval anymore. This isn't about lineage or wealth. This is about Sophia and me, and we have a life to build. I need your support, but I can't keep hiding who I am to make you happy." Lady Okafor stiffened at his words, but Ethan remained firm. "I won't apologize for who I've become, nor for Sophia. She's the woman I love, and if you can't accept that, then I'll continue to live my life without that approval." His mother was silent for a long moment. The weight of his words had struck her, but she still had her reservations. Yet there was something in Ethan's eyes that made her hesitate. Perhaps for the first time she realized that his future was no longer just about fulfilling her expectations. He had found his own path, and it led to Sophia. Days later, Ethan and Sophia stood in the restaurant, watching as a group of local employees arrived for their first official meeting. The old small restaurant was now a hub for community development. The vision was simple, but profound: to provide a place for people to work, a space for families to connect, and a safe haven for everyone. As they spoke to their staff and investors about the future, Ethan realized just how much Sophia had influenced him. She had taught him the value of authenticity, the importance of growing together, and the true meaning of love, which was always selfless, not transactional. Their story wasn't just about building a business. It was about creating a legacy where love, hard work, and community came first. Later that evening, after the meeting, Ethan and Sophia walked out into the quiet street, hand in hand. The city lights flickered as the night settled in, but in the midst of it all, they felt a sense of peace that they had never felt before. "Ethan," Sophia said, her voice soft and full of certainty, "we're going to make it, aren't we? We'll build something amazing, together." Ethan smiled at her, his eyes full of love and gratitude. "Yes, we will. And I'll never stop choosing you, Sophia. Every single day, I choose you." And with that, they walked forward into their future, knowing that together, they could overcome anything that life threw their way. Weeks passed, and Ethan and Sophia continued to build the foundation of their dream. The restaurant was flourishing, and with the added influence of Ethan's resources, they expanded into a thriving business that was rooted in their values. They hired employees who were dedicated to more than just a paycheck. They were passionate about making a difference, just like Ethan and Sophia had always wanted. But despite their success, the road ahead was not without its obstacles. As their business grew, so did the attention it attracted. The media was starting to take notice of the mechanic-turned-businessman who had transformed a small, struggling eatery into a thriving enterprise. While this attention was good for business, it also brought with it unwanted pressure and unwanted opinions. One evening, as Ethan and Sophia sat together in their office, their quiet conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. "Ethan, we need to talk," said Sophia, her voice serious but calm. She had always been the more grounded of the two, and Ethan appreciated that about her. But now there was a hint of concern in her eyes. Ethan looked up from the papers in front of him. "What's going on?" "It's the press," she said softly. "They're starting to ask questions. They want to know about your past, about how a mechanic like you could have such a successful business empire." Ethan leaned back in his chair, feeling a wave of anxiety wash over him. This had been the one thing he had feared, that his past, the very thing he had escaped, would now be the thing that defined him. "I can't hide from it forever, can I?" he said quietly, his fingers running through his hair. "The truth is out there now. I don't want to go back to that life, but I can't keep pretending to be something I'm not." Sophia nodded, understanding his internal battle. "I know, Ethan. I know how much you've sacrificed. But we need to own it. This is our business now. It's not just your story, it's our story." The next day, Ethan and Sophia were faced with the first major media interview about their business. Sophia had been the one to convince Ethan that it was time to step into the spotlight, not to hide anymore, but to tell their truth. The reporter arrived at their restaurant, a seasoned journalist who had covered stories about successful entrepreneurs and billionaires. Ethan, still uncomfortable with the attention, was apprehensive about the interview, but he knew this was a necessary step for their future. As the interview began, Sophia sat beside Ethan, her hand resting on his. They knew that this was going to be the turning point. "So, Ethan," the reporter began, "let's start with the basics. You've gone from a mechanic to a business mogul. How did that transition happen? And why did you decide to leave the wealth you had behind?" Ethan shifted in his seat, his mind racing. He had been preparing for this moment, but the words still felt heavy. "I didn't leave it behind for fame or for money," he started, looking directly at the reporter. "I left because I wanted something real. I grew tired of being seen only for my wealth. I wanted to find true connections, not people who wanted to be around me for my money." Sophia's eyes met his, her support undeniable. She knew this was the moment he had been waiting for. Ethan took a deep breath and continued. "I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I could offer. And I found that love with Sophia." The reporter was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward, sensing the raw honesty in Ethan's words. "And what about your family? The people who knew you before your success? How do they feel about this new chapter?" Ethan hesitated for a moment. The question struck a nerve. The tension with his mother still weighed on him, but Sophia's hand on his was a reminder of how far they had come. "Not everyone understands," he admitted, "but I'm not living for anyone else anymore. I'm living for myself and for the people I care about." Despite the success of the interview and the positive feedback they received, the media attention soon spiraled into something bigger than they had expected. While many applauded Ethan and Sophia's decision to embrace their truth, others began to scrutinize their relationship. The past was never as easily left behind as Ethan had hoped, and the truth about his wealth created a rift between him and his family. One day, as they were wrapping up their work at the restaurant, Sophia received a call that would change everything. It was from her father. "Sophia," his voice was strained, "there's a lot of gossip going around about Ethan. Some people from your past have started to speak out. They don't understand why you're with him. They think you're after his money. I can't let you be part of this." Sophia listened quietly, feeling the familiar tension in her chest. She had always wanted to prove herself to her family, but now it seemed like they were turning against her. Ethan, who had been listening in on the conversation, turned to her. "Sophia, you don't have to defend me anymore. We've built something real here. Don't let them pull you away from what we have." Sophia nodded, her mind made up. "I'm not backing down. This is my life, and our story. They can't dictate it for me anymore." As the weeks passed, Sophia grew stronger. Ethan supported her every step of the way, and with every new challenge, their bond grew. But there was still one final obstacle left to face: Ethan's mother. Ethan had made the decision that he was no longer going to live his life for the approval of others. Sophia was the woman he loved, and his family's judgment no longer mattered. They planned to meet with Lady Okafor one final time. This time, Ethan would not hold back. The dinner at Ethan's family home was an event that loomed over them both. Lady Okafor, still upset with Ethan's choices, could sense the change in her son. She had always prided herself on controlling his path, but now, as she watched her son sit across from her, determined and calm, she could see the resolve in his eyes. "Ethan, this is your last chance to fix things," she said coldly, her eyes glinting with anger. "Mother, I've made my decision," Ethan replied firmly, his voice unwavering. "I'm not asking for your approval anymore. Sophia and I are building our future, with or without you." Lady Okafor stared at him for a moment, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. "I don't approve, Ethan, but this is your life." Sophia, sitting beside Ethan, spoke up. I've never asked for your approval, but I'll fight for Ethan. He deserves happiness, and he deserves to be loved for who he truly is." For the first time, Lady Okafor said nothing. She looked at them, and the silence in the room was filled with unspoken understanding. The tension broke, and a new era for Ethan and Sophia began. As Ethan and Sophia stood hand in hand, gazing out at the future they had built, the weight of their journey settled on them. It hadn't been easy. They had fought against judgment, family expectations, and even their own insecurities. But now, they were stronger than ever, ready to face whatever came next, side by side. Their business had flourished beyond their wildest dreams. But more importantly, they had found something much deeper. Real love. The kind of love that doesn't need approval. The kind that's willing to stand firm, no matter the cost. They had chosen each other, not out of convenience or wealth, but because they had found home in one another. As they sat together, watching the sunset from the rooftop of their new office, one they had built together, Sophia turned to Ethan and said, "We've come so far, haven't we?" Ethan smiled, his hand gently squeezing hers. "Yes, we have. And the best part? It's just the beginning." Together they looked out at the horizon, knowing that with love as their foundation, they could overcome anything. Sophia had become not just his partner in business, but his partner in life, and Ethan had never felt more complete. As they walked into their office, hand in hand, ready to face the challenges ahead, they knew one thing for certain. Their story wasn't just about money or success. It was about love, loyalty, and standing by each other no matter the odds. Their past had shaped them, but their future was theirs to create. They were no longer just a mechanic and a restaurant owner. They were a power couple, ready to change the world together. How do you feel about their decision to stand up to their families and live life on their own terms? Is there a moment in your life when you've had to make a tough decision to follow your heart? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How would you have handled the challenges Ethan and Sophia faced? Please rate this video from 1 to 10. Let us know how much you enjoyed the journey. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more inspirational stories like this one. And remember, no matter what life throws your way, love and determination will always lead the way. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more inspiring content, and we'll see you in the next video.